Good everyone. I hope you guys have an amazing day. Welcome to another episode of ANZ Salesforce podcast. Today, I have with me a very special guest, Ben Duncombe, who is a recruitment and Salesforce specialist based in Australia. So Ben runs Talent Hub, specialized mostly in Salesforce recruitment. So welcome to my show, Ben.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So how's this year been, given the fact that, I've been hearing that Salesforce is making a tremendous progress in the ANZ market?
Yeah, I think if focusing on this year alone, it's just kind of as busy as ever. I think, last year I was rushed off my feet with opportunities, and I didn't expect it to kind of continue progressing at the speed that it had last year into this year, but really, it has. We've seen a huge amount of demand across the board, and no real sign of that slowing down. So I think Salesforce themselves are seeing a lot of kind of uptake in license purchases and new projects. Obviously, that rolls down to the partners, and then we're seeing that across the board with partners and then customers hiring. Really, so yeah, it's a busy market to be in, that's for sure.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah, I think it's pretty much the same in New Zealand as well. So let's start. Let's take a step backward, right? How's your experience as a Salesforce recruiter in Australian market? I mean, finding talent and other aspects.
Yeah, I think so. I've been in the Salesforce ecosystem for around 7 years now, and that's kind of exclusively been in ANZ. So predominantly in Australia. I have a couple of clients in New Zealand. I've done a bit of work over there over the years, but yeah, predominantly in Australia, and the hubs of that would be Sydney and Melbourne. That's where we do most of our work, and then obviously there's some other regional kind of locations or big cities, but less kind of sales demand in places like Brisbane and Adelaide and Perth. Although we are starting to see things change a little bit, but historically the market has kind of been reliant on people coming into the ecosystem. So people coming in from overseas on sponsored work visas, often being hired by the consulting firms and staying for a period of time before they get their permanent residency, and then they're able to kind of move between companies more freely. Right. Obviously, over the last couple of years, that's been more difficult. So we have seen companies having to invest in more junior talent and upskilling people from other technologies, or bringing people in from outside of the technology space, which has been really, really great to see, seeing people that are being given opportunities to kind of develop and learn and grow and I guess make a career out of the Salesforce ecosystem. So yeah, it's definitely been a challenging market over the last few years because there has been a lack of experienced, I guess, available talent. Whereas historically in years gone past, people would have been bringing in a lot more talent from overseas, which would have kind of kept up with the demand a bit better than we've been able to over the last couple of years.
Right. Okay. So that's interesting to hear, right? I think mostly because of the COVID, right? I mean, the market has kind of shifted to build up the local talent. I mean, I've seen the similar trend in the New Zealand market as well, right? So that being said, I still believe that you're still getting a lot of demands from overseas candidates, right?
Yeah, I mean, we get a lot of people that reach out that are looking to move to Australia. Daily I'm getting a large volume of people that are contacting us and looking to make that move. We still aren't seeing, although borders are open and there are companies out there now offering to sponsor visas, I think people are still being quite selective over the people they're hiring and who they're offering visas to. So although we get a lot of people contacting us looking to come to Australia, we so far this year, and we haven't helped anyone with that transition from overseas to Australia on a visa. And we still see that it's quite challenging to get an opportunity to relocate with a visa.
Right. Yeah. I understand that. That could be a bit of challenging, right? Now, what about the New Zealand market, though? I mean, the reason why I'm asking that, last year, I remember that a couple of recruiters that reached out to me saying, "Hey, are you keen to work remote from New Zealand?" Is that a growing trend? I mean, since as you mentioned, right, sometimes it's difficult to find a talent. So have you seen a trend that where companies from Australia trying to reach out, to find the talent from New Zealand?
Yeah, definitely. I don't think every company is doing that, but there definitely are some companies that are more willing to do that. I think, ultimately we've seen a lot more flexibility with companies around where they hire. Historically, we did have a lot of companies that would look for people to be in the office, and then when that became less of a requirement, people were then saying, okay, can we hire interstate? So can we find someone in Brisbane to help us and work remotely for a Sydney-based client, or Adelaide and other locations across Australia. And then when those kind of talent pools got depleted of available talent, then I think people looked at the next available pool, which was New Zealand. But from what I understand, the New Zealand market is just as busy as we're seeing in Australia. So I don't think there's lots of people around waiting for work in New Zealand either. So although I think companies have gone to that pool, I don't think it's made a huge difference in terms of the supply and demand availability in Australia.
Right. Yeah, that's right. So I think one of the things I've seen, right? Like I do remote work. I'm in New Zealand, so a lot of companies are more flexible now. Where I can work from a small town, say in Palmerston North in New Zealand. I guess the similar flexibilities Australian companies are willing to offer to someone, say in Perth or somewhere remotest town of Australia, because it's
yeah. I mean, like the time difference between Perth is obviously significant compared to Sydney. So if time difference is only the only constraint, then it makes sense also to consider New Zealand. I think obviously there are some other hoops for companies to jump through. Like if they're hiring permanently in New Zealand, then that I guess they would need to be set up from a kind of payroll and administration perspective in New Zealand. If they're hiring contractors, obviously it's a little bit different. But yeah, that's the only real consideration that companies kind of need to get around, is how they kind of engage and what the legal compliance and legislations are around hiring people in different countries, I would imagine. But for companies that are willing to go through that kind of path and invest in anything they need to get up to speed and to be able to offer contract and permanent for people overseas, then New Zealand is an obvious market, right?
Right. That's cool. I've been going through the surveys, right, which you send out every year, which is fantastic. Thank you very much for that. So I've noticed that most of the companies, they're saying that there's a huge demand for Salesforce developer, and is that the case though? I mean, do you think that there is really a shortage of Salesforce developer in the market space?
I think there's both a shortage of Salesforce developers in terms of volume, but also there's a significant, I guess, shortage of very high caliber and quality Salesforce developers. I think that's often the biggest challenge, finding someone that has a wealth of programming experience, both in and outside of Salesforce, and then follows best practice and takes good care of the orgs they work on, and deliver scalable solutions and everything that a company really, really wants, and the Salesforce developers that companies are really, really eager to find. They're very difficult to source, and I think there definitely is both a lack of numbers of developers, but then even more so when you get into that really kind of the top 10% of candidates, there just aren't many around.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you'd be surprised to hear it's a similar thing in New Zealand as well. I mean, finding the really, the someone who understands the best practices to implement the stuff, right? Not just come and just, start writing code. So yeah, we are even seeing the similar shortage in New Zealand market as well, finding that, top niche talent. Yeah, so that's one of the challenge, I guess. So that's all right. That's cool. So what's the other Salesforce skills demand in Australia? So for instance, do you see a growing trend in, say, Einstein or Marketing Cloud or?
Yeah, and just on the last point quickly, just to, I guess, explain why I think there's such a lack of experienced developers. Obviously, it's just the route from being inexperienced to experienced as a developer is probably a longer journey than picking up configuration. So we do see people coming into the Salesforce ecosystem from a completely non-technical background and becoming a Salesforce administrator or becoming a functional consultant in a relatively short space of time. Like I'm talking kind of 6 to 12 months, like being up to speed and being able to kind of work on projects and so on. But you don't really get that in the developer space, right? Unless they've come from a programming language in another technology. You can't. It can be done. Like people can definitely learn to code, of course. Like that can be done. But I feel that that's a longer journey than learning to do configuration, and that's why we've kind of had that gap of talent and the lack of experience. It's just harder to get that experience, harder to become a senior developer. Although there are lots of people in the ecosystem that will say that they're a senior developer, but when they go through interviews and when people put through technical tests, often there is a gap still in terms of what someone claims to be senior and what a client expects as a senior. That's my observation in that space. And then on your next question around where are the gaps, I think I can't remember off the top of my head what the survey said this year, but we are seeing some kind of specialized like field service lightning and CPQ. Like we are seeing some people becoming like a specialist in those fields, in those areas of Salesforce. But on the whole, we still see a lot of kind of cross-cloud expectations from hiring managers. So that they may expect someone to still be able to do Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, and communities perhaps. So I think there is growth in particular products, but we're not seeing like a huge amount of demand for one individual product specifically, if that makes sense. Like, yes, Einstein is growing, yes, CPQ is growing, yes, FSL is growing, but we don't really have that many people that purely focus on one area. And they still seem to kind of work cross-cloud, although there are some exceptions to that. But yeah, in terms of skill sets, I think we have high demand and low availability for pretty much all skill sets. If you consider kind of from admin through to technical architect, I've seen companies that have had a Salesforce admin role open for 6 months and not been have filled it after a 6-month period, and I've seen longer for developers and technical architects. So I think really, if we look at the skill sets, then and the job titles, I think really we're short of everyone. And I think the market will become more specialized following the kind of trends of the US, where people are like CPQ architects and FSL architects, as an example.
Yeah, makes sense. That makes sense, right? And one of the since you mentioned, right, I just wanted to touch briefly on the developer side of things as well, right? So one thing I believe that, it will be good, right, if a company, say for instance in Australia, XYZ company is struggling to find a Salesforce developer, right, they can always train an existing developer from a different technology. Like for instance, when I started Salesforce, right, I've been a C# developer for almost like 10 years. So the transition from a C# to Apex or LWC was pretty straightforward, because a lot of practices you do, right, in different technology, you can bring it. The biggest challenge, I would say, is just to understand the platform, the things, where you can code and where you can use the configuration. So that thing you can learn within, 12 months. But yeah, so that's just my observation though. So.
Sure, but yeah, if you've got a programming background, right? Whereas if you're coming cold, like you've never written a line of code in the past, like it's probably going to be a longer journey to get.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so if you have a programming experience, let's say 8 to 9 years, then it's kind of a very short transition to the Salesforce, because it's just another technology, right? But the concepts will remain the same. So mind you that Salesforce is pushing low code. So I don't know if that's what creating a kind of a misconception in the market that you don't really have to code in the Salesforce, but that's not really the case though, because So coming from the recruitment perspective, right, do you face any kind of challenge, right, in any specific thing you think, this is very challenging, especially from a Salesforce market perspective,
Yeah, I mean, I think like the obvious one, and I would suspect this isn't just in the Salesforce ecosystem, but candidate qualification is a difficult thing, because I don't come from a technical background. Although I've studied and I'm a certified Salesforce administrator, I couldn't tell you what a line of code does. Looking at it, I couldn't debug a line of code, and
Yep.
a lot of the demand we get is for Salesforce developers.
Right.
And a company when they come to me and they're looking to hire a Salesforce developer, they're looking for me to be able to bring someone that's going to add value. So it's difficult really to establish someone's strengths as a Salesforce developer. If they're good, if they write good quality code, if they're going to add value to a company. I think that's the biggest challenge, because I can't just say, right, show me a piece of your work and let me kind of work through that and work out if it's good quality.
Right.
So yeah, you kind of do have to go out on a limb a little bit in some cases. Obviously, you've got things like certifications. You've got trailhead badges. I think it's once you've spent a period of time in the ecosystem, you can kind of make an assessment based on companies that people have worked for as well, because you hear good things about some companies and not so great things about others. So
Yep.
if someone's worked for a good company for a period of time and stuck around, you would suspect that they've done some good work there. But yeah, I would say that's definitely a challenge as a non-technical recruiter.
Right. Okay, cool. Thank you very much for that. Now, coming to my last question, right? Do you have any advice for people looking for a Salesforce job, especially in Australian market?
So I guess it really depends on what level they are. Like if they're experienced, I think, the piece of advice I would give is to be really clear on what you want, because if you aren't clear on what you want, you'll be inundated with opportunities. And I think it's really hard then to make an assessment on which one is right for you. I think it's really important to know, do you want to work completely remotely? Do you want to work on things that are broader than just Salesforce? Do you want to work in consulting? Things that are going to be able to establish if a role is right or wrong for you. Because otherwise, there's especially for the more technical roles, there's so many opportunities out there. You could interview with 15 companies, and it doesn't really make sense to do that. So I think just really being clear on what's right for you, what you're looking for, what you can add, and what you're looking to gain from a company, both from a monetary and also experience and progression angle, I guess.
Right.
Because lots of doors will be opened for you if you have lots of Salesforce experience and you're in Australia now. And then on the more junior side, I think it's about networking and building relationships. And unfortunately, if you don't have as much experience, there aren't going to be as many doors opening for you. So it's about really hustling and making sure that you're opening those doors yourself. And really, if you don't have much Salesforce experience, I see a lot of people, thinking that a Salesforce recruiter is going to solve all of their problems. And the reality is, I don't place that many junior people in roles.
Right.
I wish I placed more. Not many of my clients come to me looking for junior talent, because they come to me when they can't find talent themselves. So they're looking for the more experienced people.
Right.
So I think don't just rely on recruiters to, solve the hiring or the job sourcing piece for you. I think you have to put a lot of that work in yourself and put yourself in the shop window. And whether that's just creating content or documenting your Salesforce journey, so that people that are online and looking for people like yourself can find and connect with that content and hopefully then offer you opportunities to explore new challenges.
Yeah, that's right. Or they can create a YouTube channel, right? To explore, to teach people Salesforce. That's one way to showcase as well, right? Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are hesitant to I think it's like, obviously if you don't have a lot of experience, it can sometimes be a bit daunting creating content, but my advice to people is there's always someone further back than you in the journey. So even if you don't think you have a lot of experience, there's someone out there that's, one step further behind that's looking for a bit of information that you can share. So someone might just be getting started or thinking about getting started, and it might be your content that helps them on that journey. And obviously that if you're kind of giving back to people behind you, that doesn't necessarily get you a job, but it does build your confidence. It does build your learning curve yourself. And also it does kind of make you more noticeable online. Yeah,
that's right. That's a very valuable advice. Thank you very much for that. Appreciate it. So that comes to my end of every questions I wanted to ask. So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. I know it's a busy Monday, but really, truly appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's just one more thing on because you mentioned around people overseas that might be kind of looking to come to Australia.
Yeah.
My advice with that, because we are getting a lot of people contact us, realistically at the moment, the place we see the most opportunity for people that are requiring visas is for the more technical roles, so developers and architects.
Right.
And also with consulting practices, right? So it's quite rare. There are some end customers that will sponsor visas, but the biggest volume of hiring companies that will offer a visa is with the big consulting firms. So they're the companies that people overseas should be kind of exploring and looking at if they are looking to get their first step into the Australian market with visa sponsorship.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Or the other thing they can do, right? They can do an internal transfer. Sometimes
Yeah.
I think it works. Like, for instance, one of the companies I work, they have an option. But I mean, like I'm in New Zealand, it's easy for us to go to Australia. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it's just always good to have the technical skill, because that's the skill that even in New Zealand market, that's people demands the most. A developer or a technical architect, someone who can code. So yeah, so that's cool. That's cool. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
definitely. No worries.
All right.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you. Cheers.